I am going to teach you how to use a food scale, and I promise you, once you start using one, you will never go back to using cups and measuring spoons. It's not near as complicated as you think it is. This is the food scale that I use. I got it off Amazon. It was like $10 worth every penny. Weight will always be a more accurate measurement than volume. My biggest reason that I love using a scale is that it's less dishes. You have to use this one thing. You don't have to use 10 million different measuring cups, a bunch of tablespoons, a bunch of teaspoons, no dishes. You just have to use your scale. First, I'm going to show you how the scale works. Here, we've just got the on and off button. This is also the zeroing out button. So you will see when I hit this, it's going to zero out. And this is the unit button. This is where you will change the unit you're using. So right now you can see it's on grams. Then we're going to switch it to milliliters, ounces, pounds and ounces, fluid ounces, and back to grams. You probably see a lot of people using grams, especially in like sourdough recipes. I use grams a lot for the recipes on my page. So I'm gonna be putting everything in my bowl. We're going to set the bowl on the scale. And of course, the scale right now is reading the weight of the bowl. You don't wanna be reading the weight of the bowl, so you're gonna hit the zeroing out button, which is this button. We're gonna hit that. And when we zero it out, it's gonna make whatever on the scale 0. So right now, the number on my scale is 0. It is not measuring the weight of the bowl right now. That is what we want, because that is how we accurately determine what the weight is of what we're putting in the bowl. So let's say a recipe you're using calls for 100 grams of oil. My scale is currently zeroed out. It says 0 grams right now. So we're just going to pour in our oil until it hits 100 grams. Now, my scale says 100 grams, which means I have 100 grams of oil in my bowl right now. Now my recipe calls for 50 grams of sugar. Right now my scale still says 100 grams from the oil, so we want to zero that out. That way we are no longer measuring the oil. Just zeroed it out. Now my scale says 0 again, even though I've got the bowl and the oil. Now I can add my 50 grams of sugar. So now you're just gonna pour in your sugar until it says 50 grams. Now my scale says 50 grams since I poured in 50 grams of sugar. And see, already I haven't had to use a measuring cup or measuring spoons for either my oil or my sugar. Literally just the bowl is our only dish right now. Now let's say our recipe calls for 5 grams of salt. Zero out my scale. Now we're just gonna add in our 5 grams of salt. My scale now says 5 grams. So in between everything that you add, you wanna zero it out in between, because you don't want to be weighing what's already on your scale. Now, if you're wanting to make a recipe that does call for cups and tablespoons and you want to convert it to grams or ounces or whatever, the same thing applies for any of the units. Grams, pounds, ounces, milliliters, fluid ounces, same thing goes either way. You're always going to just zero it out in between. If you want to make a recipe that calls for like 1 cup of flour, you don't want to use a measuring cup, you want to use grams. What I do is you can just Google or ask Alexa, Alexa, what does 1 cup of flour weigh in grams?
1 cup of flour weighs 120 grams.
1 cup of flour weighs 120 grams. So then I can just use grams to add in my flour, even if the recipe already calls for cups and